Kenyans and the rest who grew up in the 70s and 80s interacted with Sierra Leone through its music. Bunny Mark.
You're my sweetie, my sugar, my baby, my lover. So honey, let me hold you, let me love you forever.
And even this one that has Kenyan and Congolese versions. It was done by a Pamawine singer called Suleiman Ernest Rogers, whose stage name was S.E. Rogi.
Some people say there are many guys that are crazy after me.
Rogers was born in 1926 and died on 4th July 1994, 3 years after his native Sierra Leone slid into one of the most shocking and deadliest civil wars, a war that drew in Kenya as a peace enforcer in a nation overrun by a stark raving mad entity. The enchanting beaches of Sierra Leone and its lovely tropical forests are part of nature's gift to one of the oldest nations in Africa, a nation that dates back to the mid-18th century and which officially gained independence from Britain in 1961. Freetown is a city whose name shares the same historical roots with the neighboring Liberia, a history of liberty and emancipation, conflict and graft, the very same Liberia that inspired a catastrophe from which Sierra Leone struggles to recover to date. Diamonds, sparkling and shiny, whose value is pegged on its scarcity amid abundance. Sierra Leone ranks 10th in the global ranking on diamond deposits, with Russia leading. Deceit, death and dogs of war, an alliteration that best describes the war that rocked this West African nation. Some of the combatants obviously too young, yet veterans in their own right in the art of warfare.
So how long have you been with the SLA?
From 1991.
And how old are you?
22 years.
22 years.
You were 11 years old when you joined the SLA?
Yes, sir.
It is never too late to be a hero or heroine. After all, heroes are born out of tragedy. Tragic moments like this in Sierra Leone that Lieutenant General Daniel Opande walked into after it peaked following a lull.
Sierra Leone is a story. And it's a story that I have told that story. But it is good that I landed in Sierra Leone after serving in Liberia, which is just next door country. And I had done, at the highest level of leadership of peacekeeping. In other words, I was the chief military observer in Liberia. In Sierra Leone, I went as the force commander. And that is the first time the United Nations deployed the largest peacekeeping force in Africa, and during that time in the whole world. So that's when I was then appointed the force commander. By the way, Sierra Leone, had 11 years of civil war, had 11 years of civil war. And it was not, it reached a time whereby, the United Nations realized that the civil war which was going on in Sierra Leone needed a much more robust intervention, not just an intervention of sending 2,000 or 3,000, men and women to go and help them.
For Opande, this was not his first mission.
I'm not beating about my own bush, but the first one was Namibia, where I served as deputy force commander there in the 89-90, and then from there I came back home, and then I got involved again in trying to make peace in Mozambique next door. So I went to Mozambique for 2.5 years.
In Sierra Leone, Kenya was among the 28 countries that had committed their troops for the mission called United Nations Mission in Sierra Leone, also known as UNAMSIL. Retired Lieutenant General Opande was a force commander and chief military observer between November 2000 and September 2003. Upon landing, the Kenyan troops were confronted by a horrifying situation.
The peacekeepers there had already been taken hostages by rebels. It was a very tough time. There are two countries which had sent in their peacekeepers there, decided that there is no peace to be nurtured here in this country. We can't have our men and women, to remain in Sierra Leone under those circumstances. Kenya, which incidentally also had a reasonably large number of peacekeepers, had been pounced on, our peacekeepers had been pounced on by the rebels, and something like about 20, of our soldiers had been taken hostages. Zambia, which had about 500 peacekeepers, had their 400 peacekeepers, taken hostages. So I landed in this very difficult situation, and I had to figure out how are we going to restore, peace in this country. The force commander who had been there before me, his country decided that no, you come back home with about 3,000 of their own men, to go back. So here I am. I go in, and I'm given, okay, you nurture the remnants of the former peacekeepers, and then we will give you some more men and women and equipment to sort out this country. So that's the situation when I arrived there. It was not a very pleasant welcoming. There was no welcoming, actually.
When that happened, it became a local story. It started hitting page one, and of course the lead story on the broadcast stations. So as such, and because our people were under siege, to say, in a foreign country, it became a local story.
Demoralized Sierra Leonean soldiers were literally being whipped to keep fighting an aggressive enemy whose fighting methods are described by historians as morbidly brutal.
So when I went there is when I saw those mayhems that we are talking about, like, chopping people's hands. In fact, I have a photo where a baby who was something like about 1 year and a half, had her left arm or right arm, I can't remember now, chopped off. So when we landed there, we went to this amputees camp, which is right inside the city center. And when I saw that kind of atrocity done by men, by people, by civilians, to their own other civilians, it had really, traumatized me. But, as a soldier, you have to be strong.
Yeah, we witnessed some of the victims. It was horror, especially the people whose hands had been chopped off by the rebels. The long-sleeved and the short-sleeved. And such was the brutality of that war that once somebody was caught, the punishment was already decided, and you had to decide whether you wanted your hand to be chopped off to leave only this part or this part. And
the monsters under the sleepy nation's bed had been out and about, spreading terror and death from the early 90s. The districts of Kono, Kenema, and Bo in Sierra Leone host large deposits of alluvial diamonds found in riverbeds. The diamonds are a shiny part of a nation whose founding is part of the twin tragedies of slavery and colonization in Africa.
It came to prominence from 1787 when it was actually when it became a colony of freed slaves, from the United States, from Britain, and also the Caribbean. The town we now call Freetown, that is when it was created, when these freed slaves were settled in that town, when slavery had actually become useless economically. With the Industrial Revolution in Europe, in the Americas, and of course the invention of machinery, you didn't need the human muscle to grow sugarcane, to grow cotton, and to grow corn in America and the Caribbean. So the human hands became useless, and they were released to settle in a country in Africa which purportedly was free, which is a big historical lie. Because Sierra Leone had its own indigenous people who were there before Freetown was created. And Freetown, after its creation and settlement of slaves there, became a paradox.
As colonization took root across the world, this nation was not spared.
So the name Freetown is a paradox in itself. Because the slaves who were settled in that town, they now became subjects of the British Crown when Sierra Leone became a colony in the last years of the 19th century. So those are very interesting paradoxes that come with the history of Africa.
When Sierra Leone gained her independence in 1961, the first Prime Minister, Sir Milton Margai, was a focused man, so many thought.
He went into the system of patronage, corruption, and mismanagement of public resources. And therefore, through history, Sierra Leone is a portrait of, a country on one side that was a symbol of liberation and resilience. But on the other side is a country that became a portrait of the scars of colonialism, the scars of, slavery first, colonialism, and of course conflict. The famous SCC, as we call it sometimes in historical discourse, slavery, colonialism, and conflict.
Margai brought in the South African British diamond conglomerate De Beers, which partnered with the state-owned National Diamond Mining Corporation, or DMINCO, in the diamond trade. This partnership saw a massive growth of the economy. However, this company is one of the many that are blamed for instabilities that continue rocking many African nations. A bigger scheme that continues to shape and stain post-colonial Africa's history with the blood of her children. De Beers was founded by British mining magnate Cecil Rhodes. Rhodes is a controversial figure in Africa's dark colonial history.
The mineral company De Beers Diamond actually falls within that context of an imperial setup that remained to continue exploiting the resources of the continent in Sierra Leone that made independence look like a joke. You see, not just in Sierra Leone, but this is a country that has been mentioned in a number of countries within Africa in the way it exploits and harnesses the diamond resources in ways that contradict the peace and stability of many of these regimes. The philosophy or the logic behind what they do is in a setting where there is peace, in a setting where there is progress, in a setting where there is stability, you will not get it easy to exploit the natural resources the way these companies do. But where you have chaos like in Sierra Leone, you get hold of the elites who you fund in certain ways to create instability. It gives you easy access, cheap access to the natural resources.
In Sierra Leone, subsequent leaders after Margai saw nothing but self-enrichment from the minerals. Military coups became the order of the day.
When they gained independence, that actually system continued, built on the kind of patronage that the first governments of Margai, his brother, inherited from the British. So the momentary optimism that came with the so-called, in quotes, achievement of independence was short-lived as a result of that, because people started expressing discontent, people started raising grievances because of this. Elite favoritism, primitive accumulation characterized Sierra Leone just like many other African countries. And it didn't take very long before people started rising against this system, and this is the manifestation that we see in the military coup, which comes in 1992, which disposes of the government of Joseph Naidu Momo.
That coup in 1992 saw the nation gain the dubious distinction of having the youngest military ruler on the continent, Valentin Strasser, who was then aged only 25. Captain Strasser now lives a modest life after being rehabilitated from the streets where he had been living rough after being ousted from power through another coup.
When you look at the environment in which the young man creeps in, a young soldier in the army comes in with the passion of youth, wanting to transform his country that had actually gotten into the morass of corruption, patronage, primitive accumulation, marginalized of various groups, misuse of the mineral resources of the country. He was welcomed with open hands. And just like any other military juntas in the continent, he promised heaven. But what did he deliver? Hell.
By 1984, De Beers had pulled out of Sierra Leone. Diamonds started being smuggled. Lebanese traders controlled the chain, with criminal gangs running the mines. When Joseph Momo took over the reins of leadership in 1985, he tried to control the illicit trade. He would later gain favor with Israeli traders with links to Antwerp Diamond District in Belgium. As of 2012, Antwerp Diamond District controlled 84% of global diamond trade, specifically in cutting, polishing, and sale to the rich elites of Europe and the United States. However, the bloody aftermath of illicit mining and sale of diamonds, especially from Sierra Leone, saw nations in the West and Israel intervene in the late 90s.
We are very strict. Maybe you know that until a few years ago, Israel's largest export sector was diamonds. Not that we have diamonds ourselves, but polishing diamonds. So we're extremely strict on this.
If you look at the history of imperial designs in Sierra Leone and in a few other countries in the continent of Africa, the leaving of one quote-unquote master creates room for the entry of another one. And this is what happened in the case, this infamous Diamond Company leaves, and it creates room for quote-unquote independent, minor agencies that made a bad situation worse. This is the case even in the DRC, Congo, over the years, that one group of company leaves and leaves room for the other one to come that promises heaven, but as I said earlier, delivers hell in form of exploiting the natural resources at the expense of the local people, of the local economies, and also the local welfare of the populations of these countries.
By 1990, Sierra Leone was on the edge. An entire generation was uneducated, jobless, and wallowing in poverty. They were hungry and shifty, ready to follow anyone who promised change and a better life. And soon, that sweet message would indeed come from a man with a twisted mind. Foday Saibana Sanko.
Foday Sanko was the engineer of chaos in Sierra Leone. He was the head of the largest rebel group, RUF, in Sierra Leone. And when mayhem, started, I think it was on the 8th of May or something like that, when they took, a large number of peacekeepers, hostages. They did that with the, tacit approval by him.
You see, Carrier, sometimes English lets me down in trying to find words to describe Foday Sanko. He comes to fight for the liberation of Sierra Leone. But the way he does it, it is so despicable, it is so barbaric, it's so evil that no English word is enough to describe the situation.
I'm not sure that I would call, him a normal person. I'm sorry to say that. He didn't look to me. And a lot of, things that he had done before with his own, people, looked to me as if he was not really normal. But there it is, he was the leader of the RUF. So when we went there, I suggested to President Kaba and our group that if Sanko is here in the prison, we want to go and talk to him. We want to go and approach him and ask why the hell he did what he did. Because he was now under lock and key, and even if he wanted to do whatever he wanted to do, unless he had a means of doing it behind everybody's back, he couldn't do it to us. So we went to see him. And we talked to him. He was incoherent most of the time. When the leader of our delegation said, "It is your people who have taken our peacekeepers, hostages. Can you order, it? Can you order them to be released?" He said, "I cannot." We were surprised. So I asked him, "Why can't you? You are the commander of RUF up to now." He said, "You see, now I have no command myself. You can see, General, you can see me, in this situation, I don't even get out of this room. I don't even have the windows open. So how do you expect me? I don't have radio to talk to my people. How do you expect me to do that?" I realized that we were talking to somebody who is not really, normal.
We had an interview that he had at that time, and he actually appeared to be, he didn't appear to be in charge of himself. Of course, we knew that the rebels were to fight. Many of them were young, untrained people, actually a ragtag gathering of people, not quite a military the way we know it, indisciplined and what, many of them high on drugs. So you don't know whether their leader was also on those, or whether their leader had another issue, another problem.
He had just returned home and formed a rebel group called Revolutionary United Front. He called on young Sierra Leoneans to join it and topple the government. Before that, Sanko had been an army officer who had been expelled and jailed for joining a mutiny in 1971. He would later work as a wedding photographer in southern Sierra Leone. There, he met radicals who were calling for regime change. He later moved to Liberia alongside other dissidents, where they formed the Revolutionary United Front. They would receive guerrilla warfare training in Libya after joining Charles Taylor's National Patriotic Front in Liberia. He and his fellow Sierra Leonean rebels participated in the atrocious civil war in the neighboring nation that began in 1989. RUF launched its war on the government of President Joseph Momo on 23 March 1991. They began by attacking and taking control of villages and towns in the mineral-rich Eastern Province. Charles Taylor backed Sanko through supply of arms and fighters. In return, Taylor was paid through illicit diamonds extracted from the mines through forced labor. Sanko's scary tactics involved forceful recruitment and training of child soldiers, some as young as 8. He would start by turning them against their own families. Locals in captured villages were forced to extract diamonds from rivers under the watch of RUF fighters. Unable to pay his fighters, he ordered for Operation Pay Yourselves. It involved fighters looting from local communities, including their own families, and raping women and young girls to their satisfaction. This saw a huge population displaced and enslaved, as the fighters saw anything worth stealing as their own rightful wages. To them, it was a war of liberation. For fun, some RUF soldiers would take bets on the sight of expectant women, on the gender of their unborn babies. To prove the winner, they would slit the women's bellies open, remove the fetuses without anesthesia, just to satisfy their thrill. Sanko had exported what he had learned in Liberia, where the civil war was equally morbid. Lieutenant General Opande speaks about a rebel leader whom he was forced to meet and issue a warning to for threatening his military observers in Monrovia during the country's civil war.
And I landed next to where my observers stay. And then we got into a Land Rover, a vehicle, and drove to the headquarters of this lad group. When we got there, the commander who had been told that I'm coming and we are going to meet with him was not there. I said, why is he not there? So my military observer asked him, Farouk, didn't you tell him? He said, sir, I was here with him even this morning. I told him, you have already left Monrovia, you are coming, so that he should be ready. So I got concerned. So I said, who is his second in command? Second in command is not there. Who is third in command? Third in command is not there. But the his troops were very excited, sort of, sitting somewhere not very far away from us, and they're singing and dancing and whatever. There was fire going on. They are cooking something. So I said, I want to go and see, what they're cooking. When we went there, they were cooking the heart of a human being.
In March 1996, Ahmed Tejan Kaba was elected president of Sierra Leone. It was the first election since 1991 when multi-party politics was introduced. However, in May 1997, a group of disgruntled Sierra Leonean army soldiers staged a coup, which saw Johnny Paul Koroma take power. With the backing of Foday Sanko's RUF fighters and fighters from Liberia, they captured the capital, Freetown. This saw the deployment of soldiers by Economic Community of West African States Monitoring Group, popularly known as ECOMOG. The troops reinstated Kaba, but he remained a leader in charge but not in control.
My first meeting with Tejan Kaba is when we went on that mission into Sierra Leone to try and get our soldiers released by the RUF rebels. That's the first time I met with Tejan Kaba. He was in State House, and he was the president of the country, but he had no control over the country. The country was more or less under the control of, a larger part of it was under the control of rebels, and the other parts of it were under the control of peacekeepers. He was a very quiet, very humble person, and if I remember very well, when he saw us, the first thing he told us that, "I'm glad you have come. Kenya has sent a delegation here. We are really going in, we are in a mess in our country. Whatever you can do to help us, get our country back on its feet, we'll be very happy."
Most of the ECOMOG soldiers were drawn from Nigeria, then under the late President Sani Abacha. They were also accused of committing atrocities since they were faced with a dilemma. They were literally battling children who hid amongst displaced communities. By 1998, RUF and allies had lost the city, but they turned against the very civilians they had purported to protect. According to Foday Sanko, the populations that had celebrated the ouster of RUF from the capital were turncoats. This meant they had taken up arms against his fighters, arms that had to be chopped off.
The perpetrators of these actions were asking the people, do you want a long sleeve or short sleeve? By this they mean, do you want your hands cut right up here or right down here?
And my child, the other one, the suckling one, they took him and chunked it in the toilet.
Children were not spared. In some instances, RUF fighters would carve out the rebel movement's initials on the chest of their victims using machetes. Sanko would always defend them.
How can you approve that the combatant, the RUF, are responsible? Everybody who took part in this war, they are responsible, starting from those we call intervention force, Kamajos, government soldiers, even the RUF. So there is no need to talk about atrocity.
This generated anger in civilians who at some point raided Sanko's villa in Freetown, baying for his blood.
There's been a lot of anger by the public, and people are determined to get at him and kill him, and we do not want that to happen.
Let the government leave Foday Sanko to us, and we will take care of him.
We'll kill him. As long as Foday Sanko is not dead, the problem in this nation will not solve.
On this day, Foday Sanko's fighters killed 19 people. In 1999, the United Nations Security Council passed Resolution 1270, which established the United Nations mission in Sierra Leone, in which Kenya deployed 2,963 troops for the mission, whose objective was to disarm RUF and other rebel fighters. Lieutenant General Opande described the scenes that confronted him as he led the Kenyan contingent.
One of the first challenges is these different groups of rebels. They will tell you, we have 100 soldiers under our command, you may find that they only have, 15 or this kind of thing. So, or they would bring, 100 people, right? And only probably 20, 30 have got weapons. Where are the other weapons? We had to ensure that really we had information that, because some of them will hide weapons. They did hide, weapons. So we had to go ourselves into the bush and make sure that we get the number of the people they have declared they have, the weapons that they've declared they have, and we take them.
By then, Foday Sankoh's fighters had been driven out of many parts of Sierra Leone by the United Nations, ECOMOG and British forces. He was shot in the leg and later captured by Sierra Leonean forces near his home, and later was placed under the captivity of British forces within the Lungi airport.
Being a Kenyan myself, and being the person who was in charge of either the Kenyan troops or the entire UN troops in those countries, I must say Kenya did its best to ensure that we provided, that our government provided the very best men and women who went there, the equipment that was required for us to do the job, there. And I can't say enough that our leadership, our political leadership, military leadership, did exactly what contributed, toward the success of those peacekeeping.
The funny thing is that because of our participation, our Kenya military participation in Liberia and other places, General Opande was highly, and I still think he's highly regarded all over the places that the Kenyan military has been. And so when he arrived at such place, he was given VVIP treatment, and so as part of his entourage, we benefited from his status, and so we were invited to lunch at the president's. I don't know whether it's a palace or state house, a lovely place. So we met him, but of course we couldn't interview him.
He would later be transferred to a local prison where he died on the 29th of July 2003 after suffering a stroke. Thousands of common Sierra Leoneans spat on his body, a sign of spite. For Charles Taylor, the man who had financed the war, payback time was nigh. After being forced out by a rebel group called the Liberians United for Reconciliation and Democracy, or LURD, Charles was charged with war crimes in a case that captured the attention of the world. British supermodel Naomi Campbell was among some famous people who are said to have benefited from trade in blood diamonds. She allegedly received a rough diamond from the then Liberian president and warlord Charles Taylor in 1997 while in South Africa.
I am not intending to be offensive. You'll see in a moment why I'm asking this question. She makes this declaration. Do you follow?
I understand, yes.
Back in Sierra Leone, sanity had been restored and recovery begun. It is still on, and for Lieutenant General Opande, every visit to Sierra Leone is a sign of peace coming from within and a standing ovation from the people and the leaders of the nation.
Some of them have really reformed well, because when I went last year, I went and visited nearly all the places that I had participated in bringing back peace, and some have reformed, some unfortunately have not.
In December 2021, Opande was accorded the highest civilian honor by the President Julius Maada Bio. In 2025, he would also be honored by Kenya's Commander-in-Chief, President William Ruto, for his service in peacekeeping.
Well, they are asking me every now and then to come back, to our country. We need you, or we want to, honor you.
Somebody mentioned he has been named. Some children, a number of children have been named after General Pande, partly because of the efficiency and effectiveness with which he handled the situation in Sierra Leone. I mean, when you read about Opande and I think he has done some write-up, he comes across as somebody more than just a good soldier. Yes, he was such an outstanding soldier and probably the best chief of defense forces that Kenya never had because of reasons that we can have a chance to discuss in another forum, but also he was a diplomat. Because what enabled him to deliver Sierra Leone from the morass of chaos and instability was not his military genius, it was his diplomatic genius.
Taylor was indicted by the Special Court for Sierra Leone in 2003 for the war crimes committed in that country. He's serving his term in the United Kingdom. To the people of Sierra Leone, it was like a flowering moment for a dark past they wanted to forget.
Today we are happy. As far as I'm concerned, I'm one of the happiest because I lost my wife in this war. You see, my wife, I lost. They killed her. So I'm happy.
For some, especially those that we are involved in that particular war, they think something is supposed to be done with Charles Taylor. It's relevant.
Now that the verdict has been passed, it's okay for all of us, or most of us.
Over 2 decades since the end of the war, Sierra Leone continues to deal with challenges: lack of social structure, devastated infrastructure, and a population struggling with trauma, especially from amputations, continue plaguing the nation. Not even children born after the war are spared. The trauma is now generational. However, the nation is taking baby steps towards recovery. Sierra Leone has since faced and recovered from 2 major calamities, a major Ebola outbreak and a deadly landslide. However, every sunrise and sunset gives the locals the hope of a better tomorrow, even as they look back at the terrible old days when times were bad. As the echoes of Sierra Leone's past ring, they're full of lessons, and that the best warriors, which are time and patience, shall reign supreme. They enjoy the peace, freedom, and democracy which they fought so hard to recover with the help of the international community. And with the knowledge that Kenya did play a huge role in this process, makes it a moment of pride. After all, brothers and sisters are what friends can never be.